In 1979, the US government tested a heat engine the size of a coffee can, built from hardware store parts for under $100, that could replace 40% of a household's electricity. Then they stamped the final report restricted before it ever reached the public. I have the accession number. I filed the request myself 6 weeks ago. I was standing in a barn in Holmes County, Ohio. Gravel driveway. Wood smoke in the air before I could even see the house. The man who lives there runs his band saw, his drill press, and 3 overhead lights off a single contraption sitting in the corner of his barn. He built it for $87 in 1998, still running. He hasn't replaced a single part. I'll be honest, I went looking for the catch. A hidden propane line, an extension cord running under the floorboards. Something there wasn't one. What he built runs on a principle that was patented in 1816. British patent 4811. You can pull the original scan at the British Library right now. The Amish across Lancaster County and Holmes County have been building versions of this since the 1920s, quietly, while the rest of America was getting wired to a grid that would charge them forever. Before this video ends, I'm going to show you a single modification, a $4 part, that a federal scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory documented in 1979 and that the Department of Energy never published. I found it in a cardboard box in a county library basement in eastern Tennessee. They buried the report,
not the engine.
Now let me show you what your last electric bill has actually been costing you. Pull up your last electric bill right now. The average American household paid $137 a month for electricity last year. That's $1,644 a year. Over 20 years, that's $32,880, and that assumes the rate never increases, which it hasn't once since 2004. I did this math at my kitchen table after a $412 bill arrived for a month, when my wife and I were the only 2 people in the house. I went back through 20 years of records. The total was $63,000. I sat there for a while before I got up. My wife was in the other room. I didn't tell her the number because I didn't know what to say about it. That was the moment I stopped treating my electric bill as something I just paid. You've already tried the obvious fixes. LED bulbs, unplugging devices, turning the thermostat down 2 degrees. The bill went up anyway. Residential electricity rates have increased at an average of 8% per year for 2 decades straight. In 10 years, your current bill is 32% higher. In 20, it's nearly double. Pull up that bill right now. Look at the total. Multiply it by 240. That's your 20-year number. Most people never do this calculation. Think about what that number represents. A truck paid off. A year of college without a loan. A medical bill that doesn't follow you for the next decade. That money is already gone. But here's what isn't. A solution that has existed for over 90 years. Tested by a US government laboratory, used every day in Ohio and Pennsylvania. So here's what this video is really asking. If the people collecting your monthly payment knew about it and chose to bury it, would you want to know? The answer isn't new technology. It's old knowledge that survived in a very specific place, and I'm going to show you exactly where. In 1816, a Scottish minister named Robert Stirling was watching men die. The steam boilers in his town kept exploding. High-pressure vessels, poorly maintained, killing workers in factory yards. Stirling wasn't an engineer. He was a pastor, but he understood enough physics to ask a different question. What if you didn't need pressure at all? He filed British Patent 4811 on September 27, 1816. 2 cylinders, 1 hot side, 1 cold side. Air moves between them as temperatures shift. Moving air pushes a piston. No steam, no explosion, no combustion. Just heat and cold, doing what they naturally do. I pulled the original patent scan from the British Library. 8 pages, careful handwriting, diagrams that still read clearly 2 centuries later. The principle it describes is exactly what was running in that Holmes County barn when I stood there in February. Steam won the industrial era anyway, not because it was better physics, but because coal interests had secured railway contracts before Stirling's engine could reach commercial scale. That's in the British Board of Trade Records from 1825. The engine sat dormant in textbooks for nearly a century. Then in the 1920s, a community of Mennonite mechanics in Sugar Creek, Ohio started rebuilding it from scratch. They didn't have the patent, They didn't have university resources. What they had was a forge, a lathe, cast iron, leather, and a problem that needed solving. A blacksmith named Henry Borntrager figured out how to seat the displacer piston with leather and graphite instead of expensive machined metal seals. His neighbor, Borntrager, spent 2 years refining the design before printing a 16-page pamphlet in 1931 titled Plain Mechanical Power for the Plain Home. He sold it for 15 cents at agricultural fairs across Ohio and Indiana. One copy survived. Ohio State University, Agricultural Library, Special Collections. I've held it. The paper is brittle, the corners curl inward, but the measurements go down to the 64th of an inch, and every dimension has a reason. I wasn't planning to mention the second document, but I think you should know it exists. When Borntrager's barn burned in 1962, his nephew Eli, 14 years old at the time, salvaged a single notebook from the embers, cover charred black. Interior pages mostly intact. Ellie kept it for 61 years without showing it to anyone outside his community. When he passed in November 2023, his granddaughter Ruth found it wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of a cedar chest. She teaches mechanical drafting at a community college in Ohio now. She recognized immediately what she was holding: 73 pages, hand-drawn schematics, copper wire gauge for the secondary winding, 28 AWG, not 20. As some online reproductions claim, beeswax to pine resin ratio for the rotor seal, 3 parts to 1, melted at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, applied with a horsehair brush while still warm. Ely told his daughter in his final days, "It's in a notarized affidavit. Tell them it was never lost. Only waiting." By 1978, a graduate student at Penn State named David Lindholm had independently built a working prototype in the basement of the old Sackett building under Professor Arthur Henning. The engine ran for 19 consecutive days. Average output, 41 watts of usable current. The data was reproducible. His thesis was rejected, not because the numbers were wrong, but because the review committee cited insufficient theoretical framework. Lindholm left academia, moved to Vermont, built houses for 40 years. He died in 2019. His prototype is still in the attic of his farmhouse outside Brattleboro. His widow says it still spins when she winds the crank, still lighting the same 15-watt bulb he wired to it in the summer of 1979. What Stirling, Borntrager, and Lindholm were all working with is the same underlying principle. Let me show you what it actually is. In plain language, think of a Stirling engine like a lung. Cold air comes in, warms up, expands. Warm air gets pushed out, cools down, contracts. That expansion and contraction creates mechanical force. Add it to a heavy flywheel, and the force becomes continuous rotation. Attach that rotation to a permanent magnet motor running in reverse, and you have electricity. No combustion, no fuel, no chemical reaction. Just 2 temperatures doing what physics requires them to do. The temperature difference you need is 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Your basement in January holds around 55 degrees. A south-facing window in summer reaches 90 to 95. A wood stove flue on a cold morning runs at 200 or higher. Any of those differentials is enough to drive the piston and maintain the flywheel at 60 to 80 rotations per minute. Someone will say this violates thermodynamics. It doesn't. A windmill extracts energy from air movement that exists whether the windmill is there or not. Nobody accuses a windmill of violating physics. This engine extracts energy from a temperature differential that exists whether the engine is there or not. You are not getting energy from nothing. You are getting energy from something that was always there and that nobody is billing you for at 60 to 80 RPM. A permanent magnet DC motor from a treadmill wired in reverse produces 12 to 24 volts of direct current. Continuously, day and night, running. 40 watts for 24 hours a day over a full year equals 350 kilowatt hours. With the ferrite rod modification, more on that shortly, output rises to 480 kilowatt hours annually. For comparison, a residential solar installation in 2024 averages $14,000 before incentives. With a payback period of 8 to 12 years, Amos in Holmes County spent $87 in 1998. His engine has been running for 26 years. Not one replacement part. The Oak Ridge team confirmed these figures in 1979. Dr. Callaway's group tested 17 configurations. Low end, 30% displacement. High-end 40% payback under 18 months. Not projected, measured. Physics doesn't negotiate with whoever owns the transmission lines coming into your neighborhood. The science is straightforward, which left the one that should genuinely bother you. If this works and costs almost nothing, why has no one ever told you? In 1924, a man named Charles Brush wrote a private letter to the Edison Electric Institute. Brush wasn't a fringe figure. He invented the commercial arc lamp. He sold his company to what became General Electric. He understood the utility business better than almost anyone alive. In that letter, which sat in the archives at Case Western Reserve University until a researcher named Daniel Hofstadter cited it in a 1987 dissertation, Brush warned that decentralized thermal differential engines, if widely adopted by rural Americans, would render the central station model financially indefensible within 2 decades. He wasn't dismissing the technology, he was afraid of it. That's a different thing. 12 years later, Congress passed the Rural Electrification Act, signed May 20th, 1936. Federally backed cooperatives, subsidized loans, exclusive service agreements that prohibited independent generation. The Amish refused to sign. Every community in Lancaster County and Holmes County I've spoken with describes the same moment. Their neighbors got connected, and the bills started climbing. They kept building their engines. Quietly, without telling anyone, the Edison Electric Institute, which today represents every investor-owned utility in the country, a sector exceeding $400 billion, funded the curriculum that replaced this knowledge. They funded textbooks. They funded teacher training programs. They placed advertisements in every major national magazine. The memory of what communities in Sugar Creek and Lancaster County had built was scrubbed from the American imagination. You were not born ignorant of this. You were trained to be. An engineer named Walter Beale built the most commercially viable residential differential engine of the post-war era. His testimony is in the FTC hearings on rural electrification 1962 to 1968. He described patent interference, supply chain obstruction, coordinated harassment by trade associations. He could not find a single American supplier willing to sell him parts at a viable price. Beale moved his entire operation overseas. He died in 1989. His patents expired. The company that absorbed his work made sure nothing reached the American residential market. Then Dr. Calloway submitted her report. October 1979, Oak Ridge National Laboratory. The results were unambiguous. The Department of Energy stamped it restricted. The reason in the cover letter, public dissemination would create market disruption in regulated utility sectors. Ride that slowly. They had proof that American homeowners could cut their electricity costs by 30 to 40% using hardware store materials. And the official reason for suppressing it, too many people finding out would be disruptive to the companies billing them every month. Now do the math. The utility sector collects roughly $1,400 per American household per year. Over a 40-year working life, that's $56, $0 per family. The Oak Ridge report would have disrupted that math starting in 1980. They did the same calculation. Then they stamped the report. They didn't bury it because the engine failed. They buried it because the engine worked, the cost was negligible, and there were decades of guaranteed billing at stake. You can do whatever you want with that information. But the engine doesn't care about any of it. And neither does the temperature differential in your basement right now. Here's how to use it. If you're thinking this only applies to people building a new homestead from scratch, this part is for you specifically. No trenches, no permits, no contractors, no welding. What you need is a basement or garage that stays below 60 degrees, a heat source nearby, and one free weekend. Here is exactly what I bought. A brass cylinder from a scrapyard in Worcester, Ohio, $14. A steel rod and wooden plug for the displacer piston, $9. A cast iron pulley from a broken washing machine. Mine had been sitting in the back of the garage for 6 years before I figured out what it was for. Free. Vegetable tanned leather from a saddle shop in Millersburg, $8. Beeswax, $5. Beef tallow from grocery store Suet, $2. A permanent magnet DC motor from a treadmill at a Goodwill in Columbus, $22. A basic charge controller, $18. A deep cycle marine battery, $95. One ferrite rod, $4. Total $170. I overpaid on the battery. You can build this for closer to $120 if you source the battery used. Step 1 is the leather seal. I want to be upfront. I got this wrong the first time. I used a rubber gasket because I had one on the bench and didn't want to make a supply run. The engine ran for 4 days and seized. Rubber degrades under constant temperature cycling. It hardens, cracks, loses the seal. Borntrager knew this in 1931. I had to learn it myself in January with a frozen flywheel, and no good excuse. Soak a strip of vegetable tanned leather in melted beeswax and beef tallow for 48 hours. 3 parts beeswax, 1 part pine resin. Melt at 140 degrees. Apply with a brush while still warm. When you wrap the leather around the displacer piston, run the grain parallel to the direction of motion. That detail, grain direction, is the difference between 6 months and 60 years. Bortrager's original seal ran for 29 years of continuous operation without a replacement. That's in the notebook Eli kept for 61 years. Step 2. Flywheel calibration. The 22-pound, 14-inch specification stores exactly enough rotational inertia to maintain smooth continuous motion at 60 to 80 RPM. Use a kitchen scale. Weigh before you mount. If you're off by more than half a pound, the engine pulses instead of running smooth. You'll know within the first 5 minutes. Step 3. The alternator. Do not buy a new alternator online. Units marketed for wind turbines require 400 to 1, 200 RPM, and will produce nothing usable at the speeds this engine runs. What you want is a permanent magnet DC motor from a treadmill, 2.5 to 3.5 horsepower, wired in reverse. At 60 to 80 RPM, it produces 12 to 24 volts of clean DC current. They come up constantly at thrift stores, estate sales, Facebook Marketplace. People discard them because the belt broke, not because the motor failed. Step 4 is the ferrite rod. And this is what I promised you at the start of this video. Dr. Margaret Callaway documented this modification in 1979 in the personal notes that ended up in a cardboard box in a county library basement in Tennessee. It has never appeared in any published guide. Take your copper coil, the coil that sits submerged in the cold reservoir, and wrap it in a tight spiral around a ferrite rod before placing it in the water. The ferrite improves the rate of heat exchange between the reservoir and the engine's working fluid. Output goes from 40 watts to 55 watts. That's 37% more. For $4, I measured it before and after on the same unit across 3 consecutive days. The number held 5. The battery circuit. Motor output to the charge controller to the deep cycle battery to your load. One continuously charged deep cycle battery runs LED lighting for a small home, charges phones and laptops, and powers a small chest freezer on a separate circuit. A man in Mount Hope, Ohio runs 4 units in series. Total investment, $340 across all 4. Built over 3 weekends, 9 years ago. Not one replacement component. He oils the bearings once per season using the same lard-based lubricant his grandfather used on farm equipment. Last spring, I spent 2 hours in his driveway. He showed me the charge controller readings. Each unit producing between 48 and 52 watts, exactly what Dr. Callaway measured 45 years ago at Oak Ridge. His neighbor came over, looked at the setup, and asked where the gas tank was hidden. There is no gas tank. There is no trick. There is a 22-pound flywheel turning in the corner of a barn and a temperature difference that nobody is billing him for. That $4 ferrite rod was in a cardboard box in the basement of a county library in eastern Tennessee. In the personal notes of a woman who proved this works, watch the report get stamped restricted, and died in 2011 with her notebooks uncatalogued. Her name was Dr. Margaret Callaway. The engine she documented is the same one Robert Stirling drew in 1816, the same one Henry Borntrager built in Sugar Creek in the 1920s, the same one David Lindholm tested at Penn State in 1978, while a review committee told him the theoretical framework was insufficient. The principle is 208 years old. The Amish preserved it through a century in which the rest of America was systematically taught that electricity is something that comes from a wire owned by someone else. The Department of Energy confirmed it in 1979, and a cover letter in a government filing cabinet explains exactly why you were never allowed to find out. They didn't suppress it because it was fringe science. They suppressed it because the science was Solid. The cost was negligible, and there was no scenario where widespread adoption left a $400 billion billing structure intact. They buried the report. The engine was already in too many barns. If you're the kind of person who believes that 208-year-old physics shouldn't cost you $137 a month to access, you already know what to do next. Build the engine. Leave your state and your last electric bill number in the comments. Just those two things. I read everyone. Next week, I'm going to show you something tied directly to the same Rural Electrification Act, a water heating system that communities in Lancaster County have been running since the 1940s. No electricity. No gas. No solar. No wood. Works through a Pennsylvania winter. There is one component, salvageable, from something most American homeowners already own that makes it function. When you find out what it is, this video will feel like the introduction. Feel the engine. Wrap the leather seal. Drop the ferrite rod in. Then turn off the lights. Watch the bulb stay on, and don't say anything. Some things don't need explaining.